During a 13-month period in Oakland County, Michigan, in the second part of the 70s, a serial killer dubbed the Oakland County Child Killer or the Babysitter Killer was roaming free and committing gruesome crimes against children. The Oakland County child killings happened between February 15th, 1976 to March 16th, 1977. Once again, this was a 13-month period. 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, aged between 10 to 12, were abducted and eventually killed by an unidentified killer. They all went missing outside their homes or while they were on their way to or from another location in Oakland County, Michigan. The children's bodies were individually discovered in a public area within 19 days from the day they disappeared. The children were all either strangled or shot, and the 2 boys were discovered to have been sexually abused. There were at least 2 other murder cases that may have been connected. The largest murder investigation in the US history at that time was launched. Leads came and went, but no one was ever arrested.
Mark Stebbins was a 7th grader at the Lincoln Junior High School. He was 12 years old and 4 feet and 8 inches in height and weighed about 100 pounds. He had strawberry blonde hair that would have likely been covered by the hood of his parka. Mark apparently called his mother around 1:30 p.m. on the 15th of February, 1976, to let her know that he was leaving the American Legion Hall and was headed home, but he never did. His body was found 4 days later, laying on a pile of food and dirt in the parking lot of an office building in Southfield. There were also 2 wounds to the left rear of his head. The autopsy showed the cause of death was asphyxia, by the way of smothering. There were also rope burns on his neck, wrists, and ankles, indicating that he was bound while being held in captivity. Upon further investigations, it was discovered that he was sexually abused with a foreign object. Mark's body was washed by the autopsy team, and with that, the potential fingerprints were also unintentionally washed. The second victim was Jill Robinson. She was also 12 years of age. She left her home on the 22nd of December, 1976, following an argument with her mother over dinner preparations. According to Carol, Jill's mother, they had an argument about biscuits. Carol asked her daughter to help her and make the biscuits for dinner, but Jill refused. Carol lost her cool and told Jill to leave until she became a part of the family. Jill left with a denim backpack which contained some of her clothes and a plaid blanket. Jill's parents were separated, and they thought Jill just went to her father's house. Thomas Robinson reported his daughter missing at 11:30 p.m. when she did not arrive. There were 2 instances when Jill was seen. One was by a family friend at a hobby shop on Woodward Avenue, near her mother's home. The other was when there were 2 witnesses who said that they saw her in Donut Depot on Maple Road. Her bicycle was found at a local hobby store the next day. 4 days later, her body was found alongside the Interstate of 75 in Troy, within the view of the police station on the morning of December 26th. Jill's body was found laying on her back, fully clothed. No sign of rope burns, but there was a ring of deep dark red on her head. She had been shot in the face with a 12-gauge shotgun. Her body was fully clothed and wearing the same backpack she had taken with her when she left home. And upon autopsy, it seemed like she had been fed and kept for 3 days before her death. The third victim was Christine Mihalich. She was 10 years of age and was the youngest one out of the victims. She was a 5th grader at Pattonville Elementary School. She was described as shy and quiet with few close friends. She went missing on the 2nd of January 1977 after she didn't return home from a 7-Eleven store on 12 Mile Road at Oakshire. Shortly after Christine's disappearance, another kid from the same elementary school she attended went missing. This set off a panic at the school and the community. A frantic search went on for about 20 minutes, and the child was eventually found at the school grounds. At that point, the tensions were at an all-time high. Parents were lining up outside the schools to pick their children up. 19 days later, on the 21st of January, a local mailman named Jerry Wanzi was driving when he saw a blue jacket in the snow. "I saw a hand, and it scared the hell out of me," Jerry said. Christie's body was found in a snowbank at the dead-end street in Franklin Village. She was on her back with her knees drawn up. She was also in the same clothes she was last seen in. Her body was apparently frozen, and the police had to wait for it to thaw and conduct an autopsy later. Her death was true suffocation, and the police stated that there was no other sign of violence. The fourth and the last of the confirmed victims was Timothy King. He was 11 years old, and he left home on the 16th of March after borrowing 13 cents from his sister Catherine to buy some candies at the corner store. It apparently wasn't a rare occasion for Timothy to make the 3-block trip to the corner store for some candies. He left their house, brought his skateboard with him, and a football, and he headed toward the Hunter Maple Pharmacy. A store clerk, Amy Walters, remembered selling some candies to Timothy. He apparently left through the back door of the store into a dark parking lot around 8:30 p.m. The police stated that whatever happened to Tim happened between the time he left the store and before he got home. Around 9 o'clock p.m. on the same day, Timothy's parents got back to the house, but there was no sign of Tim. Tim's family started calling Tim's friends and searched around the nearby areas. The task force was alerted to another missing boy the following day. That same day, door-to-door searches were conducted, and classmates were questioned. At this point, the hysteria was already at the all-time high. Although the time wasn't confirmed if he had been taken by the Oakland County killer, the police knew that if he was, then Tim might have been alive if they found him at that time, because the killer often kept his victims alive for several days before killing them. Another witness came forward. It was a woman who told the authorities that she had seen a boy with a skateboard, much like Tim, talking to a man in the parking lot of the store he visited on the 16th of March, 1977. The man was seen talking to Tim was described as a white male with a long, shaggy hair and sideburns. Investigators then created a suspect profile based on witnesses' description of the man. A white male aged between 25 and 35 with a dark complexion, shaggy hair, and sideburns, who had a job that gave him freedom of movement and made him appear trustworthy to children, was familiar with the area and could keep children captive for long periods of time without rousing any neighbors' suspicions. A drawing of the suspected kidnapper and his blue AMC gremlin was released, and authorities started to question every gremlin owner in Oakland County. The police soon started a police operation wherein they searched people's car trunks. It was stated that if they found anything else like drugs or a firearm inside the cars, they still wouldn't make any arrests. They would just want to have Tim back alive. No motorists refused to let the police search their cars, but even then, neither Tim or his abductor were located. While Tim was missing, Mrs. King, Tim's mother, wrote an open letter to the killer on the front page of the newspaper. His parents even addressed the killer and their son through a news show. They said that when Tim comes home, they would serve him his favorite meal, which is Kentucky Fried Chicken. 7 days after Tim's disappearance, 2 teenagers spotted a body in a shallow ditch as they were driving. It was Tim's body, and it was placed just across the county line in Wayne County. His skateboard was neatly placed next to his body. His clothing has been neatly pressed and washed, and just like other victims, his body has been washed as well, and fingers and toes were manicured, cleaning out any evidence under his nails. Tim was apparently still warm when they found his body. They tried to revive him at the scene, but it was too late to save the child. There were different versions of the story, but there was supposedly a chicken bone or another funeral card from one of the past victims that was found in Tim's pocket. During the autopsy, the officials found out that Tim's last meal had been Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Hello, guys. Welcome back to another podcast episode. This week we're talking about the Oakland County child killer or killers, because at this point, we, at least on my end, suspect that multiple people were involved. Hi, Rain. How are you doing today?
Hi, good morning. Not bad. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling great, ready to talk a little bit more about this case. Generally, before we, I guess, move into the further details and the multiple suspects and all the craziness that's happening in this case, I would like to quickly plug our YouTube channel here, because I think this case is the one thing that opens your eyes more widely, let's put it this way, when you talk about this case, is when you actually look at the map. And I would like people to actually go to our YouTube channel to find the map. We're going to be showing it. And it basically shows the locations of the 4 victims. And I made the map different colors, kind of represent different victims. So you can see that all of these victims kind of were taken away from almost like the same strip of area in the Oakland County, but their bodies have been located and dispersed in different locations. I know you've taken a look at the map. Any thoughts about the map?
Oh yeah, can you explain what are the pinpoints?
Exactly. So the pinpoints, as you can see, one of the pinpoints is like a exclamation mark, and another is a sign of death. So the exclamation mark is the place where the victim has been last seen, and the death icon represents the area where their body has been found. So the first set of pinpoints, the red ones, are representing Mark Stebbins. The second one, the blue one, represents Jill Robinson. The yellow one represents Christine Mihalic, and then the last one the green one represents Timothy King. Now, I can see a pattern that all of these victims are taken from essentially generally close proximity. The only difference is that, according to how I see it, the killer or killers started dumping the bodies further from the abduction site as these crimes progressed. Because we can see that Mark Stebbins' body was found somewhat close to where he was abducted, but the last victim, Timothy King, was actually dead, far away in a different county. That was Wayne County, let's remember. So just a few insights, and we're gonna jump into some more crazy things that are happening. Do you have anything else to add before we jump into more potentially connected victims?
Just want to say this case is dark.
Really dark, and we're gonna get into some very disturbing details very soon. Now, let's talk a little bit about another suspected victim in this case. This is a 14-year-old girl named Jane Louise Allan. She was, once again, 14. She was from Royal Oak, and some of these victims were also from Royal Oak. So she's from the general location. And she was hitchhiking to her boyfriend's house. Now, that's not a good idea when you're 14. In Michigan in the 70s, as we will soon uncover, Michigan in the 70s was a goddamn disaster.
Crazy.
Oh my God, right? So she disappeared on August 8th, 1976. So this potential victim would be the second, if she is connected to the Oakland County killings, she would be the second one. She would be the one who was in between Mark and Jill.
Oh.
Because it happened, because let's remember, Mark was the first confirmed victim and Jill is the second confirmed victim in this case. There is a 10 or 11 month period of silence. So the killings really intensified when the last 3 killings happened. But between Mark and Jill, there was a pretty long period of time where nothing really happened. So Jane Louise Allan would actually fit into the timeline perfectly here. Now, once again, disappeared on August 8th, 1976, had a history of running away, ran away 5 times prior to her disappearance. She was last seen hitchhiking along the I-75 in a Pontiac on August 7th. Now, days later, her body was found floating in the Great Miami River near Dayton, Ohio. So this, in my opinion, might be one of the reasons why it's not connected potentially to this case 100%.
It's not following the pattern.
It's very far away.
Oh.
Dayton, Ohio is in Ohio. Let's remember that this is happening in Michigan, all of these 4 killings. Her body was found in a river in Dayton County, Ohio. So, it's hard to say, but once again, the timeline kind of fits in here. She was fully clothed with no evidence of sexual abuse, but her hands were tied behind her back with strips of a white t-shirt. She had died from carbon monoxide poisoning, again, something that has not happened in the other confirmed killings. In my opinion, this killing could very likely be connected, but I'm not really sure how the victim's body would have ended up in Miami River in a whole different state.
Maybe the river current floated her away, far away from Michigan.
Exactly. Now, I would like to know if the Miami River actually flows through Michigan as well. Something we probably could have looked into, but at the same time, I mean, I think we can jump to this more information unless you have something to add here.
Yeah, just thinking out loud. She doesn't seem to follow the pattern of the first 4 victims, but at the same time, if she's potentially connected, she could be the second victim. So maybe that's why there wasn't a pattern at the very beginning.
That's a good point.
Right?
The killer or killers developed a pattern later on. Also, the other thing that stands out to me is that she was 14. She was quite a bit older because, when you're a kid, the difference between 10 and 14 is pretty big, right?
Yeah.
So she was 14. She was a little bit older. So once again, I guess that's a little bit out of pattern here. Do you think so as well? Right.
Yeah, that could be the case.
We had to mention her, of course, before we jump into the suspects. Now, the suspects, oh boy, there's a lot of things happening here.
And they seem all interconnected.
Exactly. Well, I mean, there's like multiple pedophile rings that are happening in Michigan area. And some of, we will talk about at least 2 of them. Really quickly, I would like to talk about the suspect's profile. So, as you mentioned earlier, a psychological profile created by law enforcement described this killer as a fantastically clean, whatever that means, smart and sexually abnormal. A suspect profile was released on March 16th. This happened right after the last victim was abducted, Timothy King, right? And it was released on March 16, 1977. The killer was described as a 20 to 30-year-old Caucasian male who had the freedom of movement, had the capacity to store or keep his victims for at least up to 18 days. Because let's remember, one of the victims was literally kept for more than half a month. May be living with another male and relates to young people well, because that's how he gets to kind of lure them away. Another witness came forward and said that, she saw Timothy talking to a man at the corner store's parking lot, the same corner store where he disappeared from. Now, this witness believes that the boy was indeed the Timothy King, and it makes sense, right? Because who else was with the football and the skateboards at that parking lot and got abducted? It probably was Timothy King that she saw. She described the vehicle that she believed the man to be driving, the man that abducted Timothy, to be a dark blue AMC Gremlin with white stripe on its side. She also said that the stripe kind of looked like a hockey stick. And, this is all we have. At this point, we have those sketches. And one of the victims that we're going to be talking about looks very, very like the sketch, right?
Yeah.
And he's definitely, in my opinion, the most likely person to be connected, which is bizarre. Well, it's not bizarre. It makes perfect sense, right? But I think we should start with some other victim first, and maybe you want to take it away with the first victim, suspect, not victim. Sorry, suspect.
Yeah, one quick question though.
Of course.
For a question from someone who doesn't know, like zero knowledge about cars, are there any other cars that kind of could pass up as an AMC Gremlin?
I mean, I don't know much about cars also, and we're talking about cars in the 70s. I'm not really sure, but I feel like the witness was pretty, they thought that it was really probably the AMC Gremlin, so I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question.
Yeah, because maybe there's a similar car that somehow looks like it. It's also blue with a white stripe.
Exactly, but I think law enforcement probably
Knew about it.
Yeah. And they did a thorough investigation. Let's remember, this was happening as the killings were at its highest. Everyone was freaking the hell out.
Yeah, that is true. Okay, so we could talk about the first suspect.
Exactly.
Yeah, so the suspect was called Frank, or under the name Frank. Apparently, a few weeks after Timothy King's murder, there was a psychiatrist who worked with the task force that received a letter filled with spelling errors and was written by an anonymous author called Allan, claiming to be the accomplice of the killer, Frank. Under the names, these are fake names, apparently Allan wrote that they both served in Vietnam War, and that Frank was traumatized by having killed children, and that Frank had taken revenge on more affluent citizens, such as the residents of Birmingham, for sending forces to Vietnam. Allan expressed fear and remorse in his letter, saying he was losing his sanity and was endangered and suicidal. He admitted to having accompanied Frank as the latter sought boys to kill. He instructed the psychiatrist to respond by printing the code words, "Weather Bureau says trees to bloom in 3 weeks," in that Sunday edition of the newspaper. The psychiatrist arranged to meet Allan at a gay bar.
I want to step in here really quickly. Okay, so this is basically what's happening here is that there's a psychiatrist on the task force, and this guy receives a letter from someone called Allan, and Allan claims to know the killer, Frank. So it's okay, everything makes sense now. Allan said, please respond to me by printing out a certain sentence on the newspaper. So they did. And now our kind of information says that the next thing that happened, the psychiatrist arranged to meet Allan at a gay bar. Now, how did they actually arrange this?
Maybe it was written in that letter, the first letter that Allan sent. Like, maybe the letter says like, oh, print this out on the Sunday edition of the newspaper if you would want to meet on a Sunday.
Or maybe in that newspaper there was information. Like,
oh, exactly.
Meet us at this and that location.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Okay, let's move forward. What happened next?
Okay, so while Danto, the psychiatrist, that was his name?
Okay, Danto was the psychiatrist. Okay.
Sat inside chatting with the bartender, a man with the brown hair stepped off the dance floor and came up behind me, him, and acted like he wanted to talk, but then turned away and went to the bathroom. After he came out, he stared at Danto for some more, and then he walked over to the cop, asked the cop if he would like to buy him a drink, and the cop brushed off the man, thinking he was just some guy trying to pick him up, and not realizing that it may have been the Allan. The man then walked out of the bar, never to be seen again. Officially, the police state that Allan never showed up that night, but they did believe that it might have been him.
Okay, this has to be one of the most botched police operations ever. I could imagine that other police officer being like, oh man, I don't want to be in this gay club right now. And like someone came up to him, he was like, nah, it's okay. But that
We're
could
waiting
have-
for someone.
Exactly, but that could have been Allan. And also, if the psychiatrist kind of saw a man kind of like jerking around, like trying to approach, but then goes to the bathroom and then talks to the police guy, I mean, wouldn't the psychiatrist make the calculation in his head, oh, is this the guy?
Or maybe he was thinking he's going to be approached by the guy.
Yeah, perhaps he was waiting and the guy left. No one really approached him, and that was that. Okay, the next suspect on our list of multiple suspects, it's a man named Archibald Edward Sloan. So let's just call him Arch. That's how he was known. Arch grew up in Southfield, Michigan. Now, Southfield is literally the same area where Mark was abducted from, and his body was stashed. So it's very close.
Ooh.
He was a convicted Michigan pedophile who was active in the 70s and had had to complete his high school education while serving a 2.5-year prison sentence for gross indecency between same-gender underage males. In the 1970s and early 80s, Arch was convicted in 3 different sexual assault cases. Let's remember that our murders are happening from 76 to 77. When the case was reopened, his life and belongings were closely examined once more by the investigators because he was a convicted Michigan pedophile who was active in the 70s. Now, a hair was found in his car. The hair was a DNA match to evidence at 2 of the crime scenes, Mark Stebbins and Timothy King's. The hair is not his, but police believe it belongs to an acquaintance of Arch's. So essentially what happened here, Arch was a convicted pedophile. And initially, when the Oakland County killings were happening, they didn't really find any connection, and maybe they didn't even bother to look that much into this guy. Later on, I think it was the 90s or something like that, they reopened the case file once more, and they looked at Arch's basically evidence, and they looked at evidence found in his car. Now, in his car, there was a hair, a human hair found that was a match to a human hair found on 2 of the victims' bodies. Now, this hair did not belong to Arch, and Arch stated multiple times that he was loaning out his car, probably to his pedophile buddies.
But he probably knows.
He knows.
Yeah.
Arch definitely knows. Arch is literally the guy who could tell us. Now,
Before that, can we talk about how he looks exactly like the sketch?
Exactly like the sketch. Not his current self, because he's an old coot, but when he was young, you have his picture right here when he was young, and the suspect's, the sketch looks very similar. Very similar.
Yeah, the first time I saw it, I was like, yeah, this is him.
This is him. He could have potentially abducted him, but then it's strange because law enforcement believe he could only be an accomplice. Because let's remember, none of his DNA was found on any of the bodies, but there was a DNA match to a hair found in his car. So someone who had his car killed at least 2 victims. I mean, that's the only way I can.
Yeah.
That's the only way, right? Really quickly want to finish up on this guy because we still have some additional information about him. Arch is reportedly the owner of this car where the hair was found. Prosecutors were considering him as an accomplice to the suspect. He could be a direct link to whoever the killer is, the prosecutor told. He was questioned by the OCCK task force. OCCK stands for Oakland County Child Killer. And the force questioned him, and actually he was made to take a polygraph test administered by them in 2021. So that's like last year. But Arch failed, and therefore he implicated himself. Now, polygraph tests, not really sure how credible they are, but he failed. He failed it for what it's worth,
That's
right?
pretty bad still.
Very bad. Now, according to a former Detroit news reporter, Marnie Rich Keenan, Sloan isn't talking despite being given incredible offers to get out of prison on a tether, and a new identity, but he still refuses to talk. It was believed that Arch Sloan often lent his car to his friends who also happened to be pedophiles, just like him. So the law enforcement is actually offering this guy to get him out of prison, a new life. He doesn't want it, you know what I mean?
That's pretty bizarre.
Bizarre, but he doesn't want to rat out his nasty...
So he's protecting someone.
He's protecting his nasty friends.
What makes you think? It actually makes you think. Is he scared or is he really just protecting the killer?
When you look at him currently, he's really old. I don't think there's much life left in him. So I think he doesn't care anymore. He has a new life in prison. Maybe he's used to that life in prison. Doesn't really want the freedom, you know. He's been there for a while at this point. So maybe he's just used to living in jail. Doesn't ever want to leave.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, let's jump to another guy in our list.
Oh, I did a bit of research and it could potentially be John Wayne Gacy.
The infamous John Wayne Gacy, right?
Clown killer. I read a little bit, and apparently in 1977, a witness said to have seen Tim being abducted by two men. One described as being in his late 20s, and the other described as bearing strong resemblance to the serial killer John Wayne Gacy, who was allegedly in Michigan around the time of the killings. However, John Wayne Gacy's DNA did not match the DNA found on the victims' bodies. It was believed that Gacy had also been in Michigan around the time the murders took place. However, again, in 2013, several DNA tests were conducted, and John Wayne Gacy's DNA did not match any DNA found on the victims' bodies. The authorities confirmed that John Wayne Gacy was not the Oakland County child killer. Gacy killed his first victim in 1972. By 1976, he picked up the pace on his murderous spree and claimed another 24 victims from April of 1976 through the end of 1977. Bizarre.
That's literally... So basically his killing spree literally happened during...
the OCCK killings.
Yeah, exactly, right? It was literally the same 2-year span. And it was said that he was in Michigan at this time also. Yep. Another thing that we kind of looked at the OCCK killings and basically John Wayne Gacy killings. So I don't think he could be responsible for all of them. I don't recall which one. I think it was the Jill's case where Jill was killed
on a January
22nd, but John Wayne Gacy had another victim killed on January 20th. So I'm not really sure if he could be possibly connected to it.
Traveling throughout those days.
Yeah, to all of them, right? But I think that Tim King's, death could potentially be linked. Now, law enforcement said that they don't believe that he was responsible.
Yeah, but it's just completely bizarre how coincidental it was.
I mean, it looks like Michigan in the 70s was one of the most dangerous areas in America when you think about...
Yeah. Like, how much of a coincidence it could be. Like, John Wayne Gacy was in Michigan during the time when the OCCK was on its killing spree.
And OCCK is not even probably the worst that's happening. We have multiple pedophile rings at the same time.
Plus John Wayne Gacy.
Yeah, we have literally a pedophile island. The North Fox Island in Lake Michigan in the 70s was literally pedophile island. Ran by Frank... what's his name? I forgot his name. But this guy, I want to quickly find this additional information. His name was Frank Sheldon. He was a philanthropist, and he owned an island in Lake Michigan. There are basically these two islands, the South Fox Island and the North Fox Island. And the North Fox Island is this kind of smaller island, and this guy, Frank Sheldon, literally operated a child molestation operation there. He would team up with a local from a nearby Michigan city, a local gym teacher, and the gym teacher would tell the parents of the kids, your kids did really good in gym class this year, so we want to fly them out as a reward to our island and show them around. And once they're in the island, they would basically tell the kids, well, let's go skinny dipping. Let's all be naked. It's okay, boys. There's no girls around.
That is so screwed up.
I don't think we can connect this, though, to the OCCK.
Yeah, it's probably not connected, but it's so disturbing that everything's happening at the same time.
It's very crazy. Maybe the whole of America was like this in the 70s. Who knows? But Michigan seemed like, in particular, like really like a dark place.
Yeah, to live in at that time.
Goddamn. All right, so we talked about John Wayne Gacy. Now let's talk about a man named Christopher Busch. This guy is also, in a very dark way, potentially connected. Christopher was a convicted pedophile who lived in Bloomfield Hills, which is a little bit north from Southfield, but also kind of in the same general location where the killings happened. And he was the son of Harold Lee Busch, who was a high-level executive for the General Motors Auto Company. Let's remember that this is Detroit, well, close to Detroit, Michigan. GM has their headquarters. Now, Chris Busch had been in police custody shortly before Tim King's abduction for suspected involvement in child pornography. The victim's family members had believed that this man, Chris Busch, could have been the killer. However, Chris passed the polygraph test administered by law enforcement. Chris had been in police custody before Timothy King's abduction for suspected involvement in child pornography. He allegedly committed suicide in November of 1978. However, strangely, there was no gunshot residue and blood splatter found on him. The entry wound was between his eyes. He was also found wrapped neatly under his sheets. I don't know how you kill yourself by shooting yourself in the head when there's no gun residue, and then after you're already dead, you still tell God, like, or devil in his case.
Give me 5 seconds to wrap myself up.
Yeah.
Definitely a cover-up.
It's cover-up. He was someone did him in, put in that work.
Yeah.
Someone, maybe his family members, I don't know, someone put in that work on Chris Busch, right?
Yeah.
But what happened next was when his house was searched, a drawing of a little boy screaming in agony was found in his house. Now, the drawing of this child has an eerie resemblance to our first victim, Mark Stebbins. And this drawing is like a nightmare drawing.
Definitely scary. Really spooky.
It's spooky. His whole house kind of looks like a big fat mess, I'm not gonna lie. There's all kinds of stuff there, but that drawing just makes you wonder what the hell is happening there. Also, ropes were found in his closet. There was also a shotgun shell found in his room. However, this shotgun shell cannot be matched with the caliber used to kill Jill Robinson. Let's remember that the second victim, Jill Robinson, was killed with the shotgun. Now, law enforcement even took this shell to NASA to try and see if they could get an identification of the caliber, and there was no way in which they could do that, unfortunately. Also, Chris Busch, he had a blue Vega car, which looked like the infamous blue gremlin spotted at one of the abductions. After Chris allegedly committed suicide, more like someone put in that work on him, there was no more confirmed activity from the Oakland County child killer. Also, pretty bizarre, right? This guy gets, killed or committed suicide, if that's the case, and then it stops, Also, it was later revealed by investigators that Chris Busch was in custody while police investigated the killings, and he had personally admitted that he was a pedophile. And in 2012, it was revealed that there was zero evidence suggesting that Chris Busch is the Oakland County child killer. His DNA does not match the physical evidence that investigators have, but at the same time, there's a whole bunch of circumstantial evidence. I would put it that way. Your general thoughts?
Well, that's why I asked you that question. Are there any other cars back then that kind of looks like an AMC Gremlin car? Because I took a Google search of his car apparently, and I found this out. It looks similar, right?
Has the stripe?
Yeah.
The hockey stripe, right?
Right? So it could potentially pass up as the Gremlin.
Yeah, but it's strange because law enforcement does not believe that he is somehow connected.
Maybe because they were dependent on the DNA matches.
Potentially, right.
Yeah, and also, I was thinking, the sketch. We found a sketch on a wall, right?
Yes.
And did it belong to him? Did he do it? Or was it placed there when the cover up happened?
Ooh, that's a good point. So that would basically mean that someone did him in and then kind of as a hint to
Yeah.
everyone left a drawing
What if he was actually framed?
framed, right? Well,
He was killed and that sketch was put on the wall, and so police would think, oh, this is Mark Stebbins. He's the one who did it.
potentially anything's possible.
Yeah.
Maybe someone in the close circle
Yep.
of multiple pedophiles that were operating in Michigan, in Oakland County. Maybe someone did him in.
Yeah.
They were afraid
Oh, yep.
that he's gonna spill the beans.
Eh.
Wanna jump to the next guy we have?
And it is so disturbing. So the next guy is Theodore Lamborgine. Or Ted. We could call him Ted.
Yeah.
He used to be an auto worker for Ford Motor in Brook Park. He was part of a 1970s child pornography ring together with his partner in crime, Richard Lawson. And they preyed on young boys. Now, on March 27, 2007, investigators told the television station that Ted was considered the top suspect in this case. Ted pleaded guilty to 15 sexual assault related counts involving young boys rather than accept a plea bargain that would have required him to take a polygraph test on the Oakland County killings. He also rejected an offer of reduced sentence in exchange for a polygraph on the case.
Similar to our boy Arch Sloan.
Yeah, exactly. So are they scared or are they protecting someone?
I mean, I don't know, maybe they have like kind of a pact. Like a pact. The pedo pact.
Ugh. Yeah,
And-
never to throw someone under the bus.
Yeah.
This is so disturbing. But in 2006, Richard Lawson, the partner in crime, who was already serving a life sentence for murder, told the authorities that he knows who the Oakland County child killer is. There were new names of suspects in the investigation that were listed, and one of those names matched the one Lawson gave as the OCCK killer. Richard Lawson gave the name Bobby Moore, one of the deceased members of their CP ring.
Right, so we're already talking about like the guy who was connected to Theodore Lamborgine. So Theodore had a friend called Richard Lawson, and Richard Lawson told law enforcement that Bobby Moore was the killer. And law enforcement had already been suspecting Bobby Moore. So it seems like, seems like these people, could have been somehow interconnected. Everyone seems so interconnected there.
And it's so bizarre how the authorities were just investigating the killings, but they found out a bunch of other screwed up crap, right?
Exactly. They investigated the killers, but they uncovered multiple CP rings.
And a bunch of other pedophiles.
Lastly, let's jump into our last suspect, who is James Vincent Gunnels. James Vincent Gunnels was around 15 to 16 years of age at the time of the murders, so he was just a teenager. He was apparently a companion or a friend of Christopher Busch, the same guy that we talked about, the same guy where he was, someone put in that work on him. At one point, investigators thought that he was the best lead in the decades-old mystery because his DNA is a mitochondrial DNA match to a hair found on the body of the third victim, Christine Michalich. A mitochondrial match means that the hair belongs to Gunnels or a male relative on his mother's side. Oh man, so someone in his, either him or someone in his family killed Christine.
But he probably knows about it as well.
Of course. And he was a friend of Chris Busch, the guy where someone did him in.
Exactly.
Whoa. And then in 2012, he told authorities that he had nothing to do with the child killings, probably because he was a free man. He didn't want to lose that freedom. He said, "I'm not guilty. There is that is that. But at the same time, I know the state police twist words to their advantage. My heart goes out to those families. It really, really does. I don't feel that they were served justice through any of this. However, Gunnels tried to cheat on one of the polygraph exams and failed a second one regarding Christine's murder. He also sat down with the family of Timothy King, but provided no clarity as to how his hair, or someone from his lineage from the mother's side, was on Christine's body. But still, Gunnels denied knowing anything about the Oakland County child killings. I think this guy is definitely connected, right? Because how...
He knows something.
He knows something, and then you look at his pictures, he's a pedo when you look at his pictures.
Yeah.
He did some stuff. So I would say Arch is connected.
Yeah.
Because there's a hair literally in his car that was found. The same kind of hair was found on two of the bodies. And then this last guy, Gunnels, Vincent Gunnels,
And it's also connected to it.
it could literally be his hair found. So I think Vincent Gunnels and Arch are connected. Vincent Gunnels is connected to Chris Busch. So Chris Busch is also connected. So we have three guys connected. Now, previously, you talked a little bit about Theodore Lamborgine. Theodore Lamborgine had a friend named Richard Lawson. And Richard Lawson told police that a man named Bobby Moore was responsible.
Yeah, but he was already deceased, and he was part of their CP ring.
Okay, so how I think this could be happening is that James Vincent Gunnels and Chris Busch were in the pedophile kind of local Michigan activity ring, and they had a connection either directly or indirectly with Arch Sloan. And I would also see that those other three guys, Richard Lawson, Theodore Lamborgine, Bobby Moore, were probably also connected. Now, we don't really know who's connected to who knows what. I feel like they are also all kind of hush-hush about their business, but I feel like in some way, directly or indirectly, they're all connected. And I would say that Arch Sloan is definitely connected directly to the killings in one way or another. I mean, you just have to say it, right? Vincent Gunnels is also definitely connected to the killings, and I definitely think that Chris Busch knows. And maybe this kind of explains why he was taken out. He was taken out.
There was a cover-up.
Chris Busch was taken out because he knew too much.
Most likely, yeah.
He knew too much. I think whoever took out Chris Busch also know. Now, who took out Chris Busch, I don't think we know, right?
No idea.
But this is a really badly interconnected, all over the place kind of case.
That's why I was saying maybe they're protecting one man. Maybe that one man is a very powerful man or woman, who knows? And they're all afraid of it. Him or her.
Right.
Or maybe there were multiple killers.
So you think there could be a leader?
Yeah, maybe. Maybe they're afraid of that leader or that OCCK killer, the real one. They're protecting him, or they're scared of him.
They're scared of him, right?
Yeah.
Another thing that I want to quickly mention is that it was not mentioned in most of the research, but I found this one article that kind of claims that all of the 4 victims, along with hair, human hair found on them, there was animal hair found on them. Ooh. What do you think about that?
A cat or a dog, a house animal, or a barn animal?
I don't know if we have the exact
information,
animal species, but we have human and animal hair on all of these bodies.
I'm just thinking it could potentially be a household pet, right?
Yeah.
They were kept in a house. There was a dog or a cat in there.
Exactly.
All right, but so to conclude, do you think there's only one killer or there were multiple ones? Because they seem all interconnected.
I think it's multiple killers just because of the fact that look at what's happening with these kids. They're held captive for multiple days. One of the victims was held for 19 days.
Yeah.
I think there's a higher chance that there are multiple people working and committing these crimes rather than just one person.
That is so disturbing.
You have to keep the kid captive. It's also hard, right, to kind of abduct a child alone. They have a higher success rate when they're working together, I guess.
Yeah, and the tensions were at an all-time high by the time of the third, fourth killing, so it's pretty hard to hide those kids during that time, right?
It's very hard. Also, let's maybe talk about the timeline here to kind of build a profile of the killer. The first confirmed killing, who was Mark, really quickly want to just check out this information, the dates here, right? So I wouldn't get confused. Mark Stebbins. And I can see that Mark Stebbins was actually abducted in February 15th of 76. The second victim was Jill Robinson. Jill Robinson was abducted of the same year, but now not February, December 22nd. It was more than 10 months later. There was a 10 months gap. So it could be that Mark was actually abducted by one person, and now Jill was abducted by multiple people, because we know that this whole interconnected child ring, there's multiple people operating in the local area, right? Now what's the most crazy for me is that let's look at what's happening next. So, Jill Robinson, abducted, 1976, December 22nd. Her body is found 1976, December 26th. She was allegedly kept alive for up to 3 days. 6 days later, Christine Mihelic is abducted on January 2nd, 77. That's like 6 days later. That's pretty bizarre. And then the last victim, Timothy King. No, Timothy King is abducted 3 months after Christine is abducted. So it's interesting because Mark Stebbins gets abducted. Nothing happens for another 10 months. Then 2 abductions happen literally within a week of each other. And then there's another 3-month period where nothing happens, and then Timothy King is abducted. So this tells me that the killer did not have the urge to kill. They probably were preying upon kids, and maybe they were kind of doing some freaky stuff, like really like creepy stuff, like following kids, maybe flashing them, like doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And when the perfect opportunity strikes, that's when they commit the kill and the abduction. So maybe this is a killer who, or multiple killers who prey on kids, but their first intention is just to prey on kids and maybe do some creepy stuff, and only abduct and kill when the most perfect opportunity happens. A kid is in a dark hallway, you kind of have the urge to do it, and then you do it. That's kind of the timeline, what the timeline kind of suggests to me. And the last kill, Timothy King, his body was dumped very far away in comparison to where his abduction took place, as opposed to the other killings. It was dumped even in a different county. I think that's also something to take into consideration. Maybe by the end of this, the killer realized that he will get, or they will get caught, and maybe they stopped, or maybe they moved to a different county.
Maybe because by the time they killed Timothy King, the tensions were already at an all-time high on that specific county, on Oakland County, so they were like, maybe they thought it's better to dispose of the body in the next county.
Exactly. I think that's a very likely scenario. I mean, yeah, it's a wild case.
Do you think the killer or the killers ever felt bad? Like, remember there was a 10-month gap between the killings? Maybe they had their first victim, Mark, and maybe the killer tried to suppress the urge to kill another kid, felt bad, but then eventually couldn't take it.
Maybe
Right?
that was the case, or maybe they couldn't take the urge and just started doing. That's a valid point. I'm not really sure if they felt bad. I don't think people who do these things, they feel bad about it. They don't have any remorse. They're just evil to the bone.
Yeah.
So I don't think they felt bad. Honestly, I think they're evil human beings, and I hope they're all in hell.
Yeah, rotting in hell.
I really hope that that's the case.
It's wrong to prey on people, let alone the vulnerable.
Yeah, kids who can't really defend themselves.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Maybe this is why, I don't know, kids need to have like pepper spray on them or like some guns or something like that. I mean, it's America.
Not guns.
You could get something in Walmart anyways.
Maybe just a taser. They're
Taser.
kids. They might use it to themselves.
Exactly. Oh yeah, maybe it's not the best idea to
Yeah.
give guns to kids. Maybe we'll have more crimes than
Exactly.
yeah, but regardless, I think this is a messed up situation, messed
Pretty
up
messed
case.
up.
Definitely the darkest one that we've talked about so far, but also I had no idea that Michigan in the 70s was a war zone for kids.
Yeah. I mean, it's not even one specific suspect. There are multiples around the area.
There's multiple not connected CP rings operating independently. There's a CP island in Lake Michigan.
Yeah.
CP island in Lake Michigan.
Crazy. Completely
Crazy.
bizarre.
Bizarre. Anyways, I think it's a time for us to wrap it up. It's been a good, lengthy podcast. I enjoyed talking about this disturbing case.
Yeah. But we do hope justice will be served for the families.
I hope so. Seems like some of these people are already serving jail time. Yeah. Anything you would like to add to the audience before we sign off?
Oh, let us know what you think. It's a very disturbing case and we'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas.
Exactly. We'll see you on the next one, guys. Take care.
Bye.